Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will tell you about a neighbor who says that my house is not my house. After a long day at work, I anticipated a relaxing evening at home. After weeks of back-to-back projects, I was exhausted. Late-night client conference calls, early morning staff meetings, and endless travel between nearby counties filled my schedule. I left my house at sunrise, grabbed a coffee from a nearby cafe, and began a day of negotiations and contract finalizations. I was too busy to look at my living room before running out the door in my slightly wrinkled dress shirt. Imagine my surprise when I returned home early, maybe around 6 in the evening, and saw a huge moving truck parked in front of my house. I parked my car on the curb. I could see a few heavy cardboard boxes on my porch from afar. I remember taking a deep breath in my car and wondering if someone had delivered something to the wrong address or if a friend was playing a bizarre practical joke. My first thought was that a neighbor had run out of driveway space and parked a moving truck in front of my house. I get along with most of my neighbors, so asking for curb space wouldn't have been weird. My surroundings seemed more serious than a neighborly favor. A middle-aged man with a clipboard paced my lawn as if studying it. He wore a collared shirt and slacks like a real estate agent, but I didn't recognize him. A younger woman was scribbling on another notepad on my porch. The atmosphere was ominous. I wondered, who are these people and why are they assessing my house? As I drove into my driveway, I noticed a few things that raised my concerns. My front doorknob was bright brass. Mine was older and worn. I keep my property clean, but that doorknob had unusual markings. My mailbox had a pile of new, bright green tags when I got out of my car, making things even more unsettling. My mind raced when I saw "new property occupant" on the tags. I threw my keys in the passenger seat and walked up the path to greet these strangers, raising my heart rate. I was immediately noticed by the clipboard man. Without introducing himself, he shouted, "Can I help?" like I was intruding. Intrusion on my property. I calmed down. I rarely argue, but this was incomprehensible. I usually have polite, rational conversations, but it was hard to stay calm. I said, "Yes, actually." Before I could finish, the woman on my porch looked at me in surprise, furrowed her brow, and stammered, "What are you talking about? We're told this house is empty. Are you a caregiver?" The idea that I wasn't the owner alarmed me. I politely explained that I bought this house years ago and wasn't a caretaker. "I've lived here this whole time," I said. Man with clipboard seemed unconvinced. Instead, he said my neighbor Crispin told him the property was abandoned. He said, "Your neighbor Crispin told me you left town months ago and didn't plan on coming back." I couldn't believe it. Crispin was always a meddlesome figure. This neighbor frequently complains about leaves blowing into his yard and trash can placement. Crispin's odd behavior never went beyond mild irritation. We had fought before, but I never imagined him abandoning my house to a stranger. I asked the man to wait while I searched my bag for my wallet. I keep a copy of my driver's license and some house ownership paperwork, though mostly digital. But I had my mortgage provider's business card and a bank letter from a few weeks ago, verifying an updated payoff schedule. The clipboard man sneered when I showed them this partial proof. "Anybody could forge those," he said. The younger woman was silent, but looked skeptical. I even offered to show them the property deed, which I keep in a safe at home. That's when I realized my front door's new doorknob and lock might prevent me from entering. My gut twisted in pain. It was like the Twilight Zone. They changed my house locks, thinking it was for sale. I went to the porch to investigate, my heart racing. My original lock was gone, and the door was locked from the inside with a different mechanism. Naturally, my keys didn't fit. "What did you do to my door?" I fumed at the man's smug grin and remarks, "We have every right. The property was advertised as abandoned, and Crispin vouched that no one was living here." He started rummaging through a folder of official-looking documents, but I wasn't sure what they were. Possibly a purchase agreement, lease, or stack of useless forms. I was most upset when the man shouted and pointed at me like a trespasser. He complained, "I don't appreciate some bum yelling at me on my brand new property. Don't you know civility?" The woman beside him nodded in agreement, grimacing. "Don't you know how to behave around homeowners?" he asked condescendingly. "Don't you know how to behave around homeowners?" Hit me like a train. I owned this place for years. My name was on all legal documents. Local property taxes, utility bills, yard maintenance, roof repairs, and expensive homeowners insurance are all paid by me. I was furious when someone barged in and called me a trespasser. Despite being on my porch, I stepped back and tried to clarify the situation again to keep the peace. I told Crispin he was wrong, that I had never left the house, and that there must be a major misunderstanding. But the man replied arrogantly, "I've dealt with squatters before, buddy. You can't trick me. Before I call the police, be on your way." I lost my cool. I wanted to relax at home after negotiating a complicated contract all day. I barely had time to eat. I told him straight, "I'm done being polite here. My home. No one, especially Crispin, has the right to sell or give away my property." The man's face twisted in righteous anger. He threatened to call the police for trespassing with his phone. My jaw dropped. This was unbelievable. Though furious, I knew I had legal authority. This property was mine and I had the proof. I confidently advised him to call the police. "I'll wait." I crossed my arms against my chest. "But when they arrive, they'll ask you to leave." He was surprised by my confidence, but not deterred. A nervous young woman hovered behind him. She seemed to be sensing a problem with Crispin's story. How could I prove ownership so quickly if the place was abandoned? My garden tools and personal items were still around the house or in the garage. Where did they come from? My neighbor Crispin was missing. His porch, where he usually watched visitors to his meticulously raked lawn, was empty. I suspected Crispin told these strangers the house was empty and then disappeared to avoid repercussions. I called law enforcement's non-emergency line to confirm I wasn't the issue. I calmly explained that some people on my property thought they owned it, but I had my deed and proof. The dispatcher promised to send someone immediately. I tried to stay calm despite the tension. The man started talking about how Crispin had emailed him pictures of the property and personal information he had likely gleaned from eavesdropping on me over the years while we waited. Crispin must have made me sound like an irresponsible owner who left at night and never returned. Crispin showed them the yard, pointing out the tall grass, the burned-out porch light, and the lack of a daytime car in the driveway for 2 weeks. It could have been because I traveled a lot for work, but the property wasn't vacant. A police cruiser arrived and 2 officers exited. Officer Hannah approached the porch and inquired. The man interrupted me to say he had bought a abandoned property based on the neighbor's testimony and that I was an intruder. I shakingly replied no when the officer asked if that was correct. My driver's license showed the correct address. I showed mortgage statements on my phone and digital copies of my deed from an online portal I keep for such documents. After reviewing everything, the officer asked a few clarifying questions and returned to the clipboard man. "Sir," she said carefully, "this documentation appears authentic and, on its face, indicates that the house belongs to this gentleman here." The man claimed Crispin had repeatedly sworn the property was abandoned. He maintained that Crispin was a reliable source and showed him photos of me hauling boxes out of the house. And the officer gently reminded him that Crispin is not the legal owner of the property. "Any purchase or lease agreement you have that does not involve the actual owner of record is invalid," she told him. Officer Wells, the second officer, added that changing a house's locks without the owner's permission could be trespassing or breaking and entering in some jurisdictions, especially if done with the intent to occupy or take control of another's property without due process. Hearing that, the man turned white. The younger woman became mortified and uneasy. Even though I was still angry, I felt some relief. I appreciated the police's calm and objective approach. They didn't arrest him, but they asked him to leave my porch and move his belongings. I said I had no idea Crispin had lied or why. Crispin may have wanted new owners who would develop the land to raise property values or new neighbors who were less of a nuisance than I was. Crispin may have wanted a referral fee from the man for connecting him with new property. Either way, his actions were outrageous and likely illegal. Officers advised me to file a formal complaint since Crispin was missing. They promised to write a brief incident report and that I could sue Crispin or the man if they did anything again. The man tried to fix things. He offered me money if I would let him keep the property. He said, "Well, can't we work something out? If I pay you a certain amount, I can continue my renovation plans." I realized he really thought he had found a good deal on my house. The blood boiled. "No chance," I said. "I live here. You cannot pay me to leave. Even at an absurd price, I won't sell. I'm staying." Additionally, this community has legal processes. Squatting on someone's house is illegal. After losing but still angry, the man gathered his belongings and removed his lock under the officer's watch. After leaving the replaced lock on my porch, he stomped down my steps, mumbling about Crispin compensating him. His younger companion tenderly apologized to me before leaving. I shook my head, too exhausted and furious to forgive. As their truck drove away, I thought this bizarre episode was over. However, Crispin's involvement sparked my anger. I've always tried to get along with neighbors, including Crispin. We've argued about property lines, landscaping, and Crispin's general dislike of anything unseemly. Crispin once complained about my late-night barbecues, even though we always ended by 10 and never played loud music. Crispin went crazy again when I built a small fire pit in my yard, claiming it was unsafe. Crispin would tape passive-aggressive notes to my mailbox about my grass, which sometimes grew too tall when my work schedule was crazy. Crispin's attempts to declare my property abandoned were unconscionable. The next day, I took off work to resolve issues. I upgraded my front doorknob to a high-security lock. I then installed a security camera above my garage and one facing my porch. Before that fiasco, I had a basic security system, but I never felt the need to fortify. I photographed everything: the replaced lock, the new doorknob, the boxes they brought. I got copies of the police incident report and decided to consult a local attorney to see if I could sue Crispin. Crispin arrived in my driveway as I finished installing the new cameras that afternoon. I noticed Crispin's face was red, either embarrassed or angry. Before Crispin could respond, I crossed my arms and demanded, "What on earth were you thinking, telling those strangers my house was abandoned?" Crispin had the nerve to roll his eyes and shrug. "I was under the impression you moved out," Crispin said. "I saw you loading boxes a couple weeks ago. I had cleaned out my basement and donated to a local charity." Crispin knew I hadn't moved because my car was in the driveway at night and he saw me come home. "You can't give away someone's house even if you thought I left." "Did you offer it to him?" I asked. Crispin tightened jaw. Crispin downplayed the severity. "I just said it looked empty. They couldn't move in right away. It was a misunderstanding." I laughed sharply, more out of disbelief than amusement. "A misunderstanding? Changed my locks and claimed ownership. Not a small mistake. This is an attempted property takeover." Crispin scoffed and muttered about how I should maintain my property if I don't want people to think it's abandoned. I said, "This goes beyond yard maintenance, trying to stay calm. You told them I wouldn't return. I was threatened with police involvement. Do you realize your mischief?" Crispin tried again, saying, "Well, it's not my problem. They misunderstood me." I stopped listening. It was clear Crispin wouldn't apologize or admit guilt. Crispin left with a sarcastic, "Have a nice day," as if nothing had happened. I raged. Crispin was infuriatingly innocent. I decided to consult a lawyer. A colleague referred me to a local real estate attorney later that week. I made an appointment, brought my paperwork, and explained the entire process. Attorney was shocked but not surprised. "It's not uncommon for neighbors to misrepresent property status," she said. "But rarely is it taken this far." She said Crispin could be liable for slander of title or fraud for what he said and did to attempt this purchase. Crispin may have wanted me out to buy the property cheaply or had a deal with someone else. The attorney advised me to gather more evidence and send Crispin a demand letter stating that he should stop interfering with my property rights. I also consulted my friend Avery, who worked in local government and had experience with disputes like this, while considering legal options. Avery warned me that Crispin may be well connected in the community and would play the victim if we escalated. Avery also suggested I ask other neighbors if Crispin had made false claims about their properties. Crispin had done something similar with Dina, his neighbor across the street, on a smaller scale. Dina said Crispin complained to a local official that an unused fountain in her backyard was an environmental hazard. Crispin called the structure a rodent breeding ground and told code enforcement Dina had left. Dina complained to me that Crispin was always looking for reasons to declare a property unfit or vacant, the Crispin pattern. That information prompted me to take action. Local code enforcement received my official complaint, not to accuse Crispin of code violations, but to alert the city to his property status manipulation. I also informed code enforcement that Crispin misrepresented my property to buyers. After listening politely, they said they would keep it on file and advised me to contact law enforcement if Crispin kept harassing me. Meanwhile, something odd happened. Crispin started lurking around my property lines more often 2 weeks after that incident, always with a camera or phone. Crispin would photograph my driveway or backyard from the fence. Although I initially ignored it, the pattern was suspicious. Crispin came up to my front curb one morning with a camera, clearly taking a picture. I walked outside with my phone, recording Crispin. One good turn deserves another, right? Crispin ran away, muttering, "I'm just documenting the neighborhood. This nation is free." That was enough for me. My attorney helped me write a cease and desist letter telling Crispin to stop trespassing, photographing my property, and misrepresenting my property status. Crispin couldn't claim ignorance because we sent it certified mail, return receipt requested. As usual, Crispin posted a note in his front window the following week that read, "Neighborhood nuisance. Some people can't handle freedom of speech." It was a direct shot at me. I didn't escalate. Instead, I went legal. I could file a civil complaint if Crispin broke the letter. One subplot involved my coworker Zephyr, who had a boundary dispute with a neighbor. Zephyr hired a surveyor to mark the property lines, revealing that the neighbor was encroaching by a few feet. That gave Zephyr negotiating power. Zephyr advised me to do so in case Crispin argued about property lines. I followed the advice and hired a surveyor to remark my entire property. Indeed, Crispin had to remove a few decorative stones he had placed 6 inches over the boundary line into my yard. Crispin glared at the surveyor, but the markers were true. Although it was a small victory, having a professional confirm my land's boundary with Crispin's was satisfying. Crispin began to face neighborhood opposition as the weeks went on. Crispin tried to pass off my property as abandoned. Word spread. Even people who kept to themselves were shocked. Some neighbors I rarely spoke to told me they supported me. Crispin was never very friendly on the block. Crispin's vitriol and false accusations were tiresome. Crispin once tried to sabotage a yard sale by telling buyers the items were infested, according to a neighbor 2 doors down. Another neighbor said Crispin called the police on a group of harmless skateboarding teens near the sidewalk. Crispin was beginning to regret his hostility. The local homeowners association heard about Crispin's attempt to sell my property. Not all homes here are part of that association, but Crispin's was, and he was in good standing until now. It appears the association board reviewed Crispin. I don't know how that board works, but a volunteer told me Crispin was under investigation for unethical or covenant violations. Crispin may lose association voting privileges or face penalty fees, especially since his claims about abandoned properties sowed community distrust. One of the best twists was when Ellis, the man who tried to move in, contacted me through my attorney to apologize for the misunderstanding. Crispin reportedly charged Ellis a finder's fee for procuring this abandoned house. Ellis realized Crispin was scamming him when police arrived that night. Ellis must have been furious at Crispin for setting him up. My attorney told me Ellis would sue Crispin in small claims court for that fee and any costs he incurred changing locks and moving furniture. My attorney asked me to confirm that Crispin misrepresented my property, and I did, because it was true. Ellis was rude that day, but Crispin's deception caused the whole mess. I quietly collected Crispin's puzzle pieces over time. I informed my attorney of every new Crispin meddling and fraud allegation. I debated suing Crispin for the trouble he caused. The big question was whether Crispin was worth my legal time and money. Some part of me wanted Crispin to pay so he wouldn't do this to me or others again. Other parts of me wanted to move on. My attorney advised me to send Crispin a demand for reimbursement because my lock had been changed. My property was in turmoil. I had to pay for a survey, and I had to take time off work. We discovered Crispin had a history of minor legal issues, including boundary disputes with former neighbors. One case involved Crispin settling out of court for a few $1,000s. I wondered how Crispin's small antics became such a big deal. Crispin continued taking photos of the neighborhood, but more discreetly, and left cryptic messages on his porch sign. It became a local joke. The sign read, "Unauthorized watchers, mind your business one day, and beware of unscrupulous squatters the next," referring to Ellis. Crispin probably enjoyed causing conflict for its drama and attention. However, Crispin's actions were harmful. Telling someone my house was abandoned nearly jeopardized my living situation and could have worsened without police intervention. I decided to sue Crispin for damages after much deliberation. My attorney filed the paperwork, detailing Crispin's deliberate misrepresentations, the harm it caused me, including having to leave work, replace locks, install cameras, hire a surveyor, and endure high stress, and his ongoing harassment. This was not a criminal lawsuit. The local police stated Crispin's actions would not be criminalized without more evidence of fraud. The civil route looked promising. A process server brought Crispin the papers one crisp morning. The server said Crispin claimed he had done nothing wrong and that this was a big misunderstanding. Crispin declined signing. The server dropped the papers at Crispin's feet and left, as some jurisdictions allow. Crispin tried to make me look like a troublemaker before court. Crispin posted neighborhood leaflets accusing me of frivolous litigation and wasting taxpayer dollars. People ignored or rolled their eyes. To the hearing, Crispin brought a disorganized binder of random printouts, likely emails to Ellis or photos of my property. As a courtroom hater, I was nervous, but I was ready. My attorney meticulously detailed Crispin's behavior, Ellis's statements, Crispin's suggestion that my house was abandoned, Crispin's suspicious acceptance of a finder's fee, and Crispin's harassment. We had the police report, surveyor's report, and neighbors' accounts of Crispin telling Ellis I'd moved on. Crispin claimed throughout the hearing that he was just repeating rumors he heard from others, but he had no proof. The judge patiently listened to Crispin's rambling. Finally, the judge called Crispin's actions irresponsible and harmful. Crispin was found liable for the chaos he caused, even though his actions were not criminal. Crispin was ordered to pay for my lock, security cameras, property survey, and part of my legal fees. I received a small amount in damages for Crispin's harassment and stress. It wasn't much, but it disproved Crispin's innocence. The court order left Crispin furious, but he had no recourse. Additionally, Crispin lost Ellis's small claims case. Ellis had proof of Crispin's lies, including his acceptance of that shady finder's fee. The local court ordered Crispin to fully refund Ellis and pay for lock installation and other fees. Crispin had 2 judgments to pay. This was a much-needed reality check for Crispin, who finally understood that his actions had real-world consequences. Shortly after, Crispin's property was listed. About a month after Crispin lost in court, his yard had a for sale sign. Some of my neighbors thought Crispin was leaving to avoid the tension he caused. I wasn't disappointed. After weeks, Crispin's moving truck arrived, loaded his belongings, and vanished. Streets felt lighter. A family moved into Crispin's old house weeks later. They introduced themselves to the block with homemade cookies and cheerfully inquired about trash pickup times. Crispin changed completely from his prickly ways. Without Crispin, I could focus on finding peace. To reclaim the house that was almost taken from me, I painted my front porch and added shrubbery to the yard. The new family next door was friendly and thanked me for telling them about Crispin's fiasco so they could avoid unscrupulous real estate deals. I became more vigilant about property rights after the ordeal. Because connected communities are less likely to allow such abuses, I stopped letting mail pile up, installed motion sensor lights in the backyard, and strengthened my relationships with my neighbors. A letter from Crispin forwarded by the post office was an unexpected ending. Crispin wrote a brief note complaining that he was forced to move because of your vengeful heart and wishing me well. Crispin tried to blame me for his misfortunes. I didn't reply. Crispin's opinion was irrelevant then. Crispin seemed to be venting frustration, but my attorney advised me to keep the letter in case he tried anything else. Crispin was lucky not to be punished for his brazen misrepresentation. The fact that justice was done gives me comfort. Not got it back, but I proved it was my house. I saw Crispin's real consequences for his scurrilous behavior, and I strengthened community bonds with neighbors I barely spoke to before. Perhaps Crispin will learn honesty and boundaries, but his bitter letter suggests otherwise. The drama Crispin orchestrated did not end well. Keep records of everything related to your property and know your legal rights. If you're not careful, someone may try to take advantage of your home, land, or boundaries. Another lesson: don't ignore signs of a troublemaker neighbor. Keep paper records, get professional advice. Importantly, don't let anger drive you to commit a crime. I'm glad I called the police, hired an attorney, and let the law reveal the truth. The day I came home to find a stranger hauling boxes into my porch and accusing me of trespassing still makes me cringe. His condescending words, calling me a bum who doesn't know how to behave around real homeowners, still hurt. It's rewarding to remember how quickly things changed when the officers saw my paperwork. Despite their flaws, moments like that remind me why we have these systems. Crispin made a big mistake by trying to pull a con or spreading lies about my place being abandoned. Crispin paid for it, in money, legal trouble, and leaving under a cloud of infamy. Neighborhood tensions have subsided. I added security features to my property and turned part of my basement into a home office to spend more time at home and keep an eye on things. Some days a week, I can work from home because my job has become more flexible. That made me appreciate my little corner of the world more. I love sipping iced tea on my front porch in the afternoon. I grow tomatoes and peppers in my backyard with gardening-loving neighbors. No longer is Crispin patrolling the perimeter, plotting to manipulate the local real estate scene. It's peaceful and friendly. After a stressful day at work, I came home to find strangers on my porch. which led to legal battles, neighborly alliances, and a revelation about how easily someone can twist reality for personal gain. I'd rather not experience that again. I learned from it and prepared for life's surprises. My biggest lesson is that no one, no matter how arrogant or cunning, can take something you legally own if you stand your ground, gather your evidence, and let the authorities, and if necessary, the courts, handle it. Friends, thank you. See you soon.